Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. I'm still actually wearing vampire makeup after making a Gentleman's Guide, well, Pentex Guide to Werewolf, and it's appropriate because James Isaac Jones, one of my subscribers, posted on my Gentleman Gamer Facebook page that he wanted to know my own clan ideas for vampire. What are some of my ideas for vampire? Well, without any beating around the bush, I've already made videos on some of these. Not everyone realised that, I'm very happy to say. The Asian Cainite bloodlines and clans that I did probably around a year ago now, maybe. So the Gaki and Bushi, I took the names from very old vampire source books that had no real depth on who these bloodlines were. Go Lung, the Jiangxi, the Chonyo Guixin, those were all constructs of mine. The mythology that went behind them, the powers that they had, and so on. And I very much recommend those videos. You know, I don't often recommend you seek out my own videos because it's a bit pretentious. However, I was quite proud of those constructs. I worked on some of them with Mr. Dan Landman, who is a very adept at this kind of thing. And the reason I did so is because I'm not a big fan, honestly, of the Cainite mythology in Vampire the Masquerade, which is quite antithetical, I suppose, to the main point of the game, especially when it comes to Gehenna, when it's all but proved to be real. I dislike that Judeo-Christian slant, Abrahamic slant, Eurocentric slant that Vampire the Masquerade has, because it's verifies the existence of God, but it also completely throws in the face vampires such as Sutek, Mithras, and others who should predate the biblical Cain, if you take Cain as an example. Also, if Cain is a real-life example, you are kind of dismissing the existence of dinosaurs and other such things. You know, no, I'm not going to get too far into it. Now, that's partly my own hang-ups as an atheist. And I certainly don't mind putting Christianity into a role-playing game as a mythology. But the reason I've got a bigger problem with it is because it doesn't make any sense when you've got vampires who are older than Cain would be if you were to date the Bible. So I make Cain a metaphor. I make Cain one of many myths in my Vampire the Masquerade games. In one of them, Mithras, the Prince of London, was asked, "So have you met Cain?" by one of the player characters, to which he merely smirked because he knows that Cain doesn't exist. He was probably one of the vampires that came up with the idea behind Cain. And that allows me to actually create vampires within Africa, within South America, within Asia, that don't have to necessarily be based around the idea that the biblical Cain was actually the founder of all vampires, because after all, why would a bunch of sub-Saharan vampires give anything of a toss about Cain from the Bible? Why would a bunch of ancient Chinese and Japanese and Korean vampires care a single jot about Cain? Because, in a sense, I don't think they should. It's just a part of the game mythology that I keep as a mythology. I definitely do not validate it. I think there are plenty of sects that believe it, for want of something better, but I don't think it should ever be confirmed as factual in Vampire. So, back to the point, bloodlines and clans that I've created. Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom, excusing the somewhat poor title of that source book, is a source book that I greatly enjoy. It covers the legacies of Africa, and I understand in the new Dark Ages 20th anniversary edition it's got some more legacies from Africa, or clans from Africa, or perhaps bloodlines of existing clans, on top of the ones that are in Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom but aren't detailed in Dark Ages Vampire 20. And I really like that source book, cover everything I want out of Africa. But what about South America? What about the bloodlines and clans that I would create there? Well, I would tie them into Mayan, into Incan, into Aztec, into also Mesoamerican historical cultures, Toltecs and the like. And the same in North America, with various tribal customs there. We, as a people, struggle to some degree because there's a lot of language over there that we could never hope to ever understand, because the Catholic Church, among other people, destroyed an awful lot of the evidence of writing that we had over there. But that doesn't mean we can't make things up. It doesn't mean we can't come up with some fantastical stories based on the limited information we know, providing we're being sensitive to the culture over there and not just demeaning it or belittling it or doing something as stupid as making a clan based entirely around gypsies. Thank God the Ravnos were expanded after first edition. But yeah, were I to make more bloodlines and clans, or more vampires about bloodlines and clans in Vampire the Masquerade, I would base them around other locations in the world. I would not focus any more on Europe or modern North America. I would make most of these things ancient, to the point that a lot of them may well have been wiped out in wars between themselves, but that doesn't stop them occasionally waking up in the modern night and no one knowing what the hell this vampire is, who it represents. Imagine a vampire, Aztec, we'll go for Mayan because that's older, waking up in the 20th century or 21st century, barely able to communicate with anyone around. He has never encountered the Camarilla, he has never encountered the Sabbat, he's probably never encountered the majority of European clans. What is he going to do? How is he going to act? What's going to happen when it turns out that he's got a tomb full of his own child, that they decided that they'd seen the apocalypse coming and decided to all go into torpor? Well, now they're waking up and it turns out the apocalypse hasn't come at all. Or maybe they want to fulfill the apocalypse. All of a sudden you've got your own sect of true Black Hand almost, people who want to bring about the end of the world. So you tie it into that sort of apocalyptic thought process that often goes around with the Mayan calendar and whatnot. And yeah, you can give them blood magic, and that can even clash with some of the Assamite sorcery or Koldunic sorcery of the old clan Zimitsi. You could do what Vampire the Requiem did with the Nahuali, the Ventru bloodline that was capable of completely separating the humanity side and the beast, one side and the other, occasionally letting it out. I did that with one of my Asian bloodlines, in fact, through a sort of ritual, the smoking mirror. You can actually harness the god mythology and apply it to clans and bloodlines from South America as an example, which is, after all, no different to what the game has already done with Setites and Children of Osiris. So why not do it with other cultures as well? You could do the same thing with India, give it a lot more depth. I did that with Asia because I thought it was woefully lacking that China, Korea and the like didn't actually have their own bloodlines, their own clans. Now, I know what you're thinking, Kindred of the East, Kuei Jin, Cathayans and whatnot. Well, I'm not a big fan of Kindred of the East, personally. It's not my favourite game. I find it slightly offensive in a way that I can't quite get around. I think it's very well written in parts, and I think some of the mythology behind it is brilliant, but I also see it as, whilst respectful in places or deferential to Asian mythology, I do see it as a Westerner's take on Asian mythology. So, I would rather than make them special and make them scary because they're special, give them the same blood pools and generations and things like that as every other global Cainite. It doesn't mean that they are Cainites, but it does mean that they are a certain race, a certain species. So you can certainly take elements from the Kuei Jin and make it disciplines in the same rule set. That is what I would do if I was to keep the Kuei Jin in. To be honest, I don't. In my own games, I just have different clans and bloodlines existing across Asia and beyond. I don't see the need to have more supernatural races in my vampire games as a general rule. I've introduced bloodlines that exist in northern Russia, you know, the wintry climes up there, some of which haven't had to, don't often have to feed, and so have become quite alien when compared to other vampires in other locations, whereas they don't actually have to feed. Often they sort of go into a hibernation mode. When they do, it becomes very much 30 days of night. They become more bestial even than the Sabbat on a good night, and so you have an almost Belial's Brood style bunch of bloodlines up there who have their own government, their own politics, they have their own organisation, their own prejudices, their own powers, with the big difference being that their hunting is not actually a calm, rational stalking someone through the snow. Their hunting is once or twice a year. They have a couple of months of sheer absolute carnage, and then they go back to plotting against each other. Then they go back to doing their thing. So there's other mythology that you can take your vampires from, and a good bloodline and a good clan is taken from existing mythology, I think. When you have to start making stuff up, it can work fantastically. But I do think that vampires, and the reason Vampire the Masquerade works is because Toreador are clearly based off of Anne Rice vampires. Ventrue is clearly Christopher Lee's Dracula. Nosferatu is clearly Nosferatu. Bruja are clearly the Lost Boys, the Gangrel are the Near Dark vampires, and so on. You know, you can quite easily attribute certain clans and bloodlines to certain vampire mediums. I think you should carry on doing that. The main issue is we lack vampire mediums, but there are still new vampire mediums coming out all the time. You have True Blood, you have Twilight, God forbid, you have 30 Days of Night, you have, I think it's Warm Bodies or something like that. You have the vampires present in Penny Dreadful. Basically, my point is that if you can find inspiration for a bloodline or a clan in other fiction, then use it and turn it into something fantastic, so that when you introduce it to the players, they can make that connection in their head. It doesn't mean they have to be the same creatures exactly, but it means that there's a feeling of recognition. The characters don't know what it is, but the players do. And that always pays off. It always pays off dividends. That is why my Asian bloodlines are all based on Asian mythology. The Jiangxi, the rigged vampires, are the hopping vampires of Chinese ghost story and the like. The Chonyo Guixin were drawn from Korean mythology, the virgin dead, these ghosts, essentially, that would prey only upon virgins and the like. There was another bloodline that I never actually produced the video for, that would... I can't recall if it was pregnant or would only prey upon pregnant people. I think it could actually essentially put a pregnant... essentially a vampiric fetus in a woman's womb, or something like that, which was again based on some Asian mythology. You know, I think that if you can make those connections, you can make some fantastic monsters. And they don't always have to be a vampire. You can make those monsters in any World of Darkness game, or indeed any role-playing game. Pulling on real-world mythology is the best weapon that you've got in order to both keep your game fresh, whilst at the same time triggering that spark of recognition, whether it's from one player or the whole group. You have got something when you do that. I hope this video, which has been a bit of a ramble, has been interesting, because I've had a bit of fun talking about it.